Okay, got it.
So if everybody would mute except for Ed right now, and Ed, would you like to introduce yourself? Would you like me to introduce you? I think everybody's read the invitation that I sent out.
Well, I really think it's an honor to share with the Church of Ocean Park my really strange experience that I had in 2010, where I went on a hike that I had done 15 times before over 2 decades. And you just never know what's going to happen in life. And it turned into a nightmare, one that I'm not sorry about, but it turned out to be a 6-day ordeal without food or water. I was fortunate enough to survive, and I'll tell you all about it. I'd like to just share a few sections of the book, which I think convey just how strange the entire experience was. And then we can take questions in the middle of the presentation if you like, or we can wait till the end, whatever you think.
Well, if
yeah.
anyone has a pressing question that you think you might forget, or if it's germane to what he's talking about, maybe raise your hand.
I'd
And
be glad to answer them.
Mhm.
Well, there were so many unusual elements in this voyage that I took that it's hard to pick out exactly which section to share, but there was enough unusual experience there that I'll just try to load you up on as much as possible. And things started out strange right in the beginning of this hike. Before the book even begins, there were incidents on the way to the hike that were very unusual, that before drive there, I had several things happen that kind of were a signal from the universe to Ed, oh, why don't you just go back to sleep? And in fact, I did go back to sleep and cancel this hike mentally. And of course, one of the aggressive real estate clients called me about some deal and woke me up. And so then after stumbling out around the room and several accidents with glasses and bowls, I decided to go on this hike. I pulled my Passat into the dirt across from his red trailer, the kind of space you would not know is there until you make it. Heat hung over the lot. Knowing it would be even hotter as the day wore on, I was in a rush to get going. It was hot enough to leave my jacket in the trunk. I glanced at the red and blue water jugs in my new wicker containers, but I was in a hurry and figured I had enough in the Camelback for the usual 3-hour hike. I stepped away from the silver trunk onto the sand and strapped on my pack. Still a little sleepy, even after the coffee, I asked the last question of the Whitebeard, meaning the senior. Hey, can you remind me where the access trail is to Warren View? Sure, the helpful man pointed 30 yards away. It was close to 1 p.m. I strolled up an incline from the campground to the road, and the familiar white water tower appeared behind the trail. West on the dirt road to the trailhead, I kept a steady pace until a brown and tan coyote stepped out of the scrub and planted its paws in my path. The trailhead sign was visible between his ears, almost as if he was park property. For the first time in 2 decades, a coyote was blocking my way to Warren View, its black snout 10 feet away, the brown-tinged auburn fur against the brown twigs of the desert. the narrow eyes above the white chin. We stood in the heat above the beige and green tents in the campground. He seemed to address me in my white short sleeve shirt and beige shorts, the coyote in its beige fur tinged with white. It was late midday toward the end of September. Any hikers would already be well into their hikes. We stood and waited. The auburn fur on his hump rumpled in a warm breeze. I leaned on my hiking stick, watched until the creature turned and crossed the road and blended with the white buds of dried borage and disappeared. I headed to the trailhead. The trailhead sign came up in 50 yards on the left side of the access road, and I crossed over to take it about 1:15 p.m. I planned to be back at my car by 4:30. The familiar sandy trail was lined with dried shrubs and succulents. After about a quarter mile, it reached Blackrock Canyon Wash, where the trail started in earnest. I stepped down into the 40-yard wide pebble channel and out of habit turned right. The wash didn't have a drop of water in it, lined by a landscape of short grasses and rocks, shriveled purple pear blossoms and dried yucca wands that had sprouted in spring. The wash broadened a mile. After a half mile of circling through the maze, I reached a fork in the road with signs to Warren Vista and Warren View. The air was stale and hot with a small breeze. The heat was excessive, though the lid on my hat kept the glare from my face. As always, I chose the sign to the right towards Warren View. The trail steepened a bit and continued up for 100 yards, then ramped up a green hillside where the grass hunched close to the ground, woven into sparse patches alongside large white boulders, fir trees, and junipers. The trip up the steep wooded hill took 20 minutes. At the top, I arrived at a plateau under a large sky with a row of trees at its extreme edge. My heart raced. It felt so good to be closing in on my cherished view of San Jacinto. But I also felt some time pressure. I rushed along what was left of the trail, an indistinct footpath twirling through the foot-high wind-blown grasses of the plateau. Just put up with me if it's kind of a long passage. A gray cone of stones and dirt appeared. At about 100 feet tall, it was the dominant feature of the landscape before me, and it would make the perfect point from which to view San Jacinto. I stepped through the indistinct grass path without paying much attention until I saw a sign I'd never seen before. 100 yards beyond the cone, in a row of trees at the far edge of the plateau. The sign read, West Trail. I walked ahead to the high conical pile, but when I got there, I was still confused by the sign. I walked past the cone and craned my neck left to search for the West Trail sign on the line of trees, but saw nothing. I gave up the search for the black and white letters, walked back to the cone-shaped pile, and took my first steps up. A rock tumbled down the cone. My seat was precariously high on a peak under the cerulean sky, across from the white crown of San Jacinto. Ending my reverie, awake to the heat, I stood up and shuffled around, settling the orange pack on my back as pebbles slipped from under my feet. After establishing my balance, I placed each step and threaded my way down the cone to the level plain of short grasses. Safely off the cone, I walked to the sandy hint of trail that I had taken across the plateau. I followed it through yellowed clumps of grass on a gradual downhill curve, expecting to reach the forest of pines and large boulders below. But after 100 yards or so, I found myself amidst multiple short paths, circling the grass, but I couldn't see a clear trail weaving through. I scanned the ground for a trail, but found nothing. I needed a marker in the landscape. My throat was itchy. The air had heated up. The sweatband on my hat was damp and dripped on my forehead. I needed to find the shade of the woods and then down and out of Blackrock Canyon. But there were no footprints of any kind. There was not a single mark on the dry ground. It was hotter than it had been when I started out at noon. I had no more water. I paced back and forth, searching the ground for footprints in a 50-yard arc between the spot where I lost the trail and a place I had been to previously. I thought if I found the West Trail sign, it might be a reckoning point. From there, I would retrace my steps to the water bottles in my trunk and head to the motel. But between the rocky hill and inside the row of green firs that lined the edge of the plateau, there was no sign. The sun continued to burn. Grasses, prickly pear cactus, and creosote bushes, nothing else. My mouth itched. I was now desperate to find my way back. Through an opening and a few feet wide, cut the edge of the plateau in one spot. I stepped cautiously into the sloped cutout. It was difficult to make out the ground below through tubular weeds and cactus, but I craned my neck for a view and saw a pebble trail on a landing 10 feet down. I disentangled myself from the spines of a prickly pear cactus, which had attached itself to my backpack. Its purple fruit swung back into place. I stepped out onto the ledge of the ditch to peer at the trail below. A turkey buzzard chanced an air current into the distant desert. I stopped squirming. I found my resolve, took off my pack, threw it over the edge into the dirt, sent my hiking stick out ahead and jumped. The orange pack cushioned my landing. The height of vertical rock and dirt between the plateau and ground showed how far I had let myself fall. The knee-high gray stones, lime green shrubs, and the tiny hedgehog cacti were familiar. I was inside the landscape I viewed from above. I could not get back up. I had no choice but to follow the path downhill. So that was the first, that was the big mistake, the jump into the desert. Does anyone have any comments or questions or?
Just to say,
Yes.
you've got me very tense.
Yes.
Right, it is pretty intense.
And you didn't bring your jacket, right?
Oh, no, I didn't. I thought it was an afternoon,
Right.
hike. I didn't bring the jacket or the water in
Right.
my trunk, the
Right.
extra bottles.
Right.
My mind kind of wandered. What happened? This is going to sound really stupid. What happened right at the beginning? You couldn't find the sign for what you usually go on, or you took a sign that you don't usually take?
I saw a sign that I have never seen ever and never saw it again. So I saw this sign, West Trail, and that attracted my attention. And I thought, wow, if I can find it again, that might be a way out of here. And then I got confused, never even finding it.
Hmm.
And then I made that choice. I can't read the whole passage to you, but
No, that's okay. I just didn't quite get that
Oh,
one
okay,
or
yeah.
two sentences. So
Oh, okay, yeah.
I got the rest.
Okay, great.
Okay, so now you're lost.
Yeah.
Um,
And I can't wait to hear the rest. Thank you.
oh, that's very nice. Okay, so there were so many different experiences here that this is one of the most astounding parts of the experience, and I'd like to hear your reaction to this. The sun climbed behind me. This is the second day. The sun climbed behind me as I followed the moon back to where I stood an hour and a half earlier, the mouth of Purple Canyon. I stared at what the higher sun now made visible, a giant drainage system of which my Magic Canyon was but a tiny part. The moon hung over a mile-wide version of my mom's old mixer bowl. Scores of rivulets descended to the basin, with several headed away from the moon in the direction I needed. I stood beneath a patch of white clouds at the foot of the canyon and stared at each of the trails winding down around me. Exhausted and warm in the rising heat, I had to choose one and only one. I would not have another chance. This was the second shot at finding my way back on that day, on the second day. I would not have another chance. Any of these arroyos would keep the moon on my shoulder, but only one would lead to the tire tracks. When the sun's rays pierced the clouds and lit a path a few feet in front of me, I took it. Of puffy clouds, leaving the other trails at the canyon mouth. I felt a strong tugging on my calves as I climbed higher on the chosen arroyo into a vista of soft brown desert hills. I saw little white puffs of cloud filled by the sun's angular morning rays also rising. The sand dunes ahead looked like baked marshmallows on sweet potato pie. Emotional boundaries disappeared. My mind shut completely. The tugging on my calves left. I was lifted along the trail. I was part of what I saw. It was part of me. But in his mindless rise up the hillside, the lost hiker felt the unity, but his brief satori ended when his small footpath and he faced a series of amber hills that extended beyond. He followed his little trail to where it ended abruptly in a pile of dunes, where countless trails circled inconclusively. He stood paralyzed in the puzzling junction. Ahead of him, the white torch in the sky threw rich blue shadows on the land. The moon had led him to an unreadable maze. His faithful friend was just another adornment in the land of the sun. The pit of mingling trails was a barbecue, and I was the meat. Even a better one would drop dead in the spot where I stood. Everything was a mass of white until I turned and saw a brown and green hillside. A sloppy surface of creosote bushes, gravel, sand, large rocks, and low, tight. And the miserable 45-degree hillside had one remarkable feature. An isolated single needle pine with broad green branches stood midway up the hill. A deep gully filled with broken rocks snaked from my boots to just below the solitary pine. I had only to get there. I would have not escaped the desert, but I had to escape the heat. The flap of my hat protected my shoulders, but the mass of the sun was on my legs, back and butt. Each time I lifted my legs in the dirt and rock trench, the weight of my boots resisted. I seemed slower with every step. At points along the way, the gully was shoulder height, and I worried that I might not be able to pull myself out when I reached the evergreen, but I was lucky. Where the tree was, the trench was only a few feet high. I pulled myself. The single needle pine threw a lace pattern over my back. Downhill in the snaking gully, white hot rocks glared. I took the limp bladder from my pack and placed it on the ground. I tried to suck water from the flat camelback. A sound came out. With a turn of the bottom seal, it emitted a pop. I stuck my fingers inside and licked off 2 solitary drops. Rising on an arc, the white-hot sun burned a wide aurora out of the sky. Silica and other minerals in the gully lit up. Hundreds of gray rocks emanated reflections from their veins. My shoulders burned as the emissions of light and heat from the stones added to the feeling. I was baking. My oasis of shadows pulled into the tree. The moon was a useless dot watching the drama. Behind the tree, chasing me, a disheveled straw doll before it. I moved closer to the trunk and fell asleep. The sun rose above Tree Canyon and turned southwest. The orange rim and silver edge of the disk peeked in above the lofting branches. I dove beneath the lower boughs, deeper into the cool shadows, as if I were mining the fur close to the trunk. I pulled rocks out and shoved my pack under the limbs, falling asleep the second my head rested on the padded black waistband. Only my bare legs stuck out from the shelter of my tree. The sun lit every stone in the canyon. My exhausted legs became the hands of an alarm clock, burning red to wake me each time the sun rose higher. This soft green creature was everything to me. Like a little boy lost in the neighborhood, I had found this adopted parent who suffered me burrowing inside it and breaking off pieces of its flesh. In a trance of thirst and exhaustion, I kept breaking branches, throwing aside stones, falling unconscious, was wakened, and shoved my padded pack deeper beneath the dangling green needles until I snuggled against the silver trunk. So that was, any questions? Yeah.
You know, we didn't hear about the first night. And when did you finally accept that you were lost? You know,
Where I left the first night, I left out, well, the first day, wow, what is this? I'm going in the wrong direction. And I ended up 18 miles away from the campground in the wilderness. I had already left the Mojave Desert and was going into the southern desert when I realized, oh my God, I'm going in the wrong direction. I have gone all this distance the wrong way. I started recognizing shrubs that were different. And then I said to myself, oh God, I'm going the wrong way, and I had to go back. I'm sorry, that's the first night. And I did end up in a beautiful canyon you can read about if you're interested, where I didn't realize the severity of the situation the first night, because it was so beautiful in that canyon that, you know, that's all it was.
What was the temperature like at night?
It was okay. One night it was very cold. The second night was cold, but the real danger was the heat during the day.
Your language and choice of words is really interesting. I mean, it really
Thank you.
catches the imagination. I don't know your background. Are you a writer? Do you
Yeah, I
talk
don't-
like that? It's just gorgeous. It
Oh,
really
well, thank you very, I
captures.
really appreciate that. Yeah, I am a writer, but what really made me more of a writer was having this experience, which was so astounding that I just had to really learn how to write prose. And it took a long time and I just love it. So I veered away from I'm a poet. I'm a particular kind of poet that's, it's commercial real estate poet is, that's very unusual. And, but what really made me improve my writing was this experience.
I feel like I'm there, but it does seem there's a way you're pulling out a life-changing experience. So thank you.
Oh, I'm very happy. Who's speaking?
That's me with right here. Oh, that's me.
Oh, O'Neill.
Claudia Landis.
Oh, Claudia Landon doesn't show on the.
Okay. Well, anyway,
Oh,
thank
okay.
you.
Oh, but thank you. Yeah.
I have a million questions, but
Oh, good.
would
Should I?
like to hear more. I don't, it would be nice to have a conversation, but it's not the format today to do that. So I will pass and wait for the next person or for you.
Okay, thank you. Well, maybe we can go back to that first night.
I'm sorry I got here late. How many nights were you out?
I was out 6 nights.
Oh, my lands.
Yeah. Yes, it was quite, yeah, it was, well, to say it was unusual would be, underestimating it.
I'm guessing you've never been lost before.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, no, I haven't. I have been lost before. And I have also had, yes, I have been lost, but nothing like this. But I have had life-threatening experiences on hikes before. I described one in the book where I had a heart attack after finding out that the clients had not informed us that this escrow had canceled. And the fee, and then I described what happened in the book when we were told by surprise that there was nothing happening. And then that led to a heart attack on another hike and I was saved there by another really incredible human being. A social worker came along with this incredible muscular boyfriend and she told him to move me in the shade and so on. And then they filled me up with water. And that's when I had a heart attack out on so I'm kind of the reject from God. That's you must have heard about that. The man no one wanted, including God. That's that's one way to look at it. But here we are. Okay. The only way I'd see my wife and daughter again was to put everything into reverse. The moon had hung on my shoulder since Purple Canyon, and now I turned to follow her up the long Bajada to that magic place. And then I would retrace my way across the arroyos and to the tire track. I told myself that the tire track must lead to a trail that I had missed before, and I started the voyage up the miles-long plain of sandy ridges back up. As the words of my hiking buddy Barry rang in my ear, what goes down must come up. After a mile or so, it must have been 7 p.m., and the full moon, which had been a small oval over Purple Canyon, became a giant searchlight. It hovered on the Bajada and led me to a silver landscape of glowing mineral traces. The sky was a violet blanket. I dropped into a little runnel, a perfect place to sleep, about 50 yards wide, sheltered on all sides. The runnel was a flat ledge that ran along the bottom of a slope lit by silver highlights, which extended 100 yards above me and ended in dark. I had my pack on the ground, confident this would be my only night out. My tongue was sandpaper. I pulled on the tube, removed the bladder from my pack, and placed it on the ground. I pressed it with my palms to push through the bladder, and only air tubes moved along inside. I had found a nursery. Let me read this whole passage. After Purple Canyon, that was the first day, the voice and smiling eyes of a young kid had grown inside me. It had replaced the tough guy who had met the challenge of jumps down the kaleidoscope landscape and who traversed the hill of thorns. LaTroya playing cards at the Rock Warrens were the desert friends of this kid, and he had enjoyed wishing down the smooth sandstone slide. Now this kid, who I laid under the guardianship of his friend, the moon. I laid my head on the black waistband of my pack and wrapped the silver emergency blanket around my body. I was comforted by the smile etched on the moon's face. And I turned away from the large rock barrier, which might be an obstacle in the morning. The bright blue and white stars of the Northern Cross rose alongside the moon. Together they formed a cradle toy above me, a kite with a ball of yarn. Vega emanated cobalt blue. I fell asleep in Baby Canyon. So I didn't realize the severity of the situation but I already was in that area 18 miles away from Blackrock Canyon, and but feeling still magical, and that feeling protected, but in nature. So that's what the first night was like.
Did you see any animals?
I saw very few animals. The coyote right at the beginning of the trail, and I did not notice other animals. Although I think sometimes it's okay to be oblivious, and maybe it's a defense mechanism, but I tend to be that way anyway, because the searchers, who really are the hero, these incredible searchers that got involved looking for me, and I describe what they did, they noticed things like snakes along the way and took pictures and stuff. I didn't notice much, no animals, just, birds here and there. and that coyote. And dead animals' bones, which became very threatening to me when I described the sheep bones in one of the passages.
Who notified the searchers and when did they do that?
Very good. The friendly guy in the red camper noticed after a few days that the day hiker, me, hadn't come back. He told the park rangers, and that started everything. That started and then my family was notified, and then they started this gigantic, impressive search, closed the park and started the search with huge meetings every morning right there in the campground and taking their electronic notes. And this is part of their stuff. They tracked me from the air, they tracked me on the ground, and everybody got to share this giant map.
That sounds awfully by chance. That almost didn't happen.
That's right. Everything about this, yes, it almost didn't happen. If you read the book, I'll read a passage here about, well,
Ed,
why don't I'll do it in order
Sorry.
because yes.
there's
Go
a
ahead.
question in the chat. Did you have any survival training?
Well, yeah, dealing with these downtown owners, it toughens you up. No, I didn't have it, but I think I had, no, I did not have survival training of any particular sort. In fact, there's passages in the book that reflect upon the fact that my father was a scoutmaster and my brother was heavily involved in the scouts, but I never was. And but I have an element in my personality, I'm sure, that it's not all about being a nice guy. I thought originally my survival was due to, and it helps to be comfortable in nature and to love nature and be so appreciative of it even when you're dying. That helped. But I also found out that my mother had hidden the identity of my uncle and what really happened to him in his life. And he was a pretty tough character that the family tried to deny his existence. This is my uncle.
Why?
We were told that he died. Why? Because he was a criminal.
Oh,
And we were told that he died in Russia before they moved. But then I found out from my aunt that he had died in Sing Sing. So I'm sure that element of toughness, helped. I'm not bragging about it. I became more aware of it later. That it takes some of that. It's not just about the nice guy. Yes?
yeah, I'm curious, your emotional state, like after 4 or 5 nights.
My emotional state?
Yeah,
Well,
and you're out of water, you're out of food, you're
yeah, it's all
lost.
described in this. Well, I had a relationship with this fly that ended up spending a lot of time with me in the canyon and followed me around wherever I was. And that became like my closest friend in
Wow.
the canyon. I also love the desert and the beauty of the desert. But after a while, obviously, that only goes so far.
You must have drank water though to keep alive that long.
No,
Really? Okay.
no, nothing, no water. What I tried to do, I described cutting a yucca on the second night out because I had heard from a friend that there was a lot of water buried inside these yuccas. And all I was left with was an impression of, oh my God, how tough these desert plants are. And you see, when you try to take one of them on and get water out of the trunk, they're much tougher than you. And they're able to survive in the desert for a reason, these plants. They really have their act together. And I tried for hours to try and get, just to get moisture out of the tips of the fronds by pulling them off the trunk and cutting into the trunk, trying to suck water out. No, I didn't do well with that.
So no water, because that's unusual. I mean, 6 days in a desert, I guess
That's
you
right.
know
I
that.
think I was the record breaker. I don't know how many people have survived without.
Yeah.
I was interviewed by a science magazine as well. And yes, I had 6 days without food or water. And it's not the food that matters, it's the
That's the
water.
water.
Because you can't masticate the food. You can't do anything with food without water. Oh, hi, Jim. Yeah. So-
I'm thinking about Hurley Jim right now, thinking, what is he thinking? Or because he has a lot of experience in the desert and in nature and at Joshua Tree. He leads our Joshua Tree trips.
Right, I know, yeah.
Yeah.
He probably likes more precaution.
Well, yeah, I guess in a way. I mean, I've taken some chances. I haven't been alone. I was thinking about a trip that one of the other people who spends a lot of time out in Joshua Tree and I went on, but we were in a fairly remote area, but it wasn't far from a campground. It's just one that hardly anybody gets into. But I guess, I mean, I'm amazed that you lasted that long without water. But I also, this is more prosaic, but it's the way I think. It's like, was there a point at which you thought, if I stay where I am, they're gonna find me easier, or?
Right, unfortunately, yes, but it was when I was old, when I couldn't even walk by then. At Salvation Canyon, for which the book is named, is the place where I knew I was going to be. That was it. And I also mistakenly thought that I would be found, that they would find that place, and then they'd be able to give the messages to my wife and daughter and follow the instructions I wrote on my hat. See, the other unusual thing about this experience is that I wanted to communicate with my wife and daughter, and the only thing I had was my hat. So I ended up with these extensive communications on my hat. And I'm thinking, well, when they find my hat, they'll follow my instructions and tell my wife and daughter what to do. But of course, the odds are that would never happen, but yeah.
Did you see any, Edward, did you see any like mirages or things that were not there?
Well, some might say that my whole experience was a mirage because of the intensity of these interactions with the desert. In other words, like when I passed these cholla cactus, they really seemed to be friends to me. And they reminded me of kids that I played tag with in the projects, and especially if you keep passing them at these different rock points. And then they seemed real to me, that they were like cowboys. Okay, so it's not quite a hallucination. Or the passage I read, very real to me, that I was with the clouds and the moon, and we were climbing this hill together. No doubt in my mind, and no effort, like I was lifted by something. So I don't know, is that probably somewhat hallucinatory? I don't know what to say. And then you're a church, there's a whole there's a Jesus sequence that was very real. In other words, it was very real to me that the Jesus figure moved several hundred tons of rocks by himself and showed up in the canyon. So things like that was real to me. It wasn't, I didn't experience it as a hallucination. I experienced it as real. Even comparing him to like a broker, I was thinking, oh, he doesn't even want anything. After moving 600, whatever, 1,000 tons of rocks and coming here to visit, he doesn't want anything. So he's definitely not a broker. I had, because you're in this, by then I was pretty much in a state of shock. So,
Bonnie has a question.
sure.
You just pretty much answered part of my question. If you have more to add as to what one could call super consciousness, if you could share what you experienced during and after, and if there's time, any emotional transformations that took place?
I'd like to say that, well, there's a transformation of just huge amounts of PTSD and having these, strange things happen, feeling like a ghost, or you're not sure you're really there, right? And you're wondering if other people are ghosts and stuff like that. About yes, I mean, when I came back, I wanted to participate more in things that mattered to me. So I tried to be an advisor to the Methodist Church for a while, things like that. Because I thought, well, they're doing good things and it'd be good to be involved with them. And then also I got more involved with artists. And then I was really amazed at how these artists, I started doing stuff downtown with artists and I saw, wow, they're really interesting. They're very collaborative. They're not selfish. They collaborate with each other and do things together. I thought that was interesting in contrast to what I was used to. But as far as emerging with a transformation, I'm more and more convinced that there has to be a spiritual revolution, and I'm waiting it to happen. But I'm not. I have no new philosophy to present. Just some kind of left-wing, progressive, whatever, Judeo-Christian progressive political thing, not really a spiritual philosophy. Disappointing, huh? Okay, let's.
Okay, thank you.
What?
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, not really disappointing to me at all. I mean, I was a little prosaic the first thing I said, but I've had experiences like yours. Not that it was 6 days and I didn't have to get lost to have them, but in the desert. And
Right, it's just a precious place.
yeah. And I'm probably going to have to leave pretty soon because I got another call at 3. But this is great and very absorbing. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yes, Jean.
I wanted to ask you, getting away from the spiritual end of things, but back to the physical body, what changes did you notice in your body aside from being tired and not being able to move your muscles? I mean, like, was your skin parched? Did you actually produce urine after a while since you weren't drinking? I'm just curious.
No, it stopped.
That's what I would think.
Yeah, it stopped producing urine on the first the first night after Baby Canyon, and I was looking around, and then I I urinated and then in a cup, because I had heard. And then when I drank it, I almost threw up. So I spit it out on the dirt and actually said to myself, wow, I'd rather be dead. I don't know if I really meant that, but that was a very revealing moment. And also then I tried to eat the dates that I had brought with me. And that's when I saw they got stuck to the roof of my mouth and they were just useless.
Yeah.
And that's what
I was glad you asked that, Jean. I forgive me, I'm a kidney doctor. And so I have all these
yes.
like questions. And when somebody doesn't have water, you get a really high concentration of sodium, and we have to give it back really slowly or else you get brain swelling. I don't have to go in that, but my poor brain is going nuts with this. And I don't need to bore everyone else with
No,
it.
I'm amazed.
Please don't
I
do
didn't
it,
have
but
kidney damage because I was found on this. Look, I got lost on Friday and was found on a Thursday, and immediately was brought to Desert Hills Hospital, and they pumped me with every kind of fluid imaginable. That's what they do. And I was still really out of it, relating to, wow, those colors are like flowers, because there were so many different colors in the tubes they attached to you. And that was quite an experience. So they saved me there, but luckily I didn't have kidney damage. I lost a lot of weight. I've still not gained it back. So I was 155 pounds. When I came back, I was 133. The only damage they could detect was regarding my legs, my ankles. So I was very lucky. You know, I was extremely lucky. But I want to share with you that, you know, there was one of our vets was in the Battle of the Bulge, which, since you're almost, you know, old enough to remember that stuff, they asked him, what was that like? You know, with your friends dying around you and being bombed like that. And he said, well, I wouldn't give it up for $1 million, but I wouldn't pay a nickel to live through it again. And that's just how I feel. There's nothing in my life to compare with this experience, except having a daughter. Nothing else compares with this. It was so astounding. It was like the list of characters was a mile long. The coyote, the cholla cactus, the fly, and then to have this incredible sheriff at the end of it all deciding, oh, the National Park Service doesn't know what they're doing. And to have him and his two buddies, one a woman, they followed my footprints 5 days after I left them, because the search went in the wrong direction, the National Park Service. And Jeffrey Joling and Tom Humphreyville, and how could I forget her name? She was wonderful. They went all night on Tuesday night, found where I was. They couldn't find me, but they found the area, and then they were exhausted. They had to be helicoptered out after doing that. So the fact that this rogue sheriff went against the search, and they found where I was after an all-night search till the dawn, that is just, and that's why I'm alive. You know, that's why I'm alive. So this has it all. I mean, that really astounded me. And as I looked into it, first of all, I couldn't find out how I was found. No, it was very hidden. No one would tell me about it until one of the searchers, Bob Moeller, he told me who I should meet and what I should find out. Sheriff took off on his own without, he didn't look and ask for permission. He just decided, I want to do my own search, and that's why I'm alive. So,
So,
yeah.
so Ed, we have about 2 minutes left.
Oh, that's all?
Uh-huh. It's almost,
Oh.
it's just about 3 o'clock. So could you finish off by telling us about what time of day it was, when you were rescued, and what were the circumstances? Like, when did you see people coming for you?
Okay,
What
sure.
was the picture?
I sure will.
If you have enough energy to be elated, or, I can't quite picture it after all that time.
Yes, well, it was an awareness. It was quite a shock that they were out in the desert as part of it. Because there wasn't anything mechanical out there, anything metal. And then to hear that sound.
Was it a helicopter? What was it?
Okay, I was out. This is when I thought I was already, I had laid down that night ready to die. And I had the Jesus experience and an affirmation of my Jewish experience. And then I fell asleep kind of with rain on and off, and then light coming on and light going off. And then I just faded away. On all previous days on the Mojave, I woke before the desert lit. Thursday morning, I didn't wake of my own accord and wouldn't have woken at all. But late in the morning, I heard I was dazed and couldn't make out my own location in the canyon. I was face down and propped myself up on my right elbow, straining my ears toward the source. It was outside the canyon. I saw the wall, but I couldn't see anything else. Without the strength to stay up or energy to lift myself, I lay down again and, seeing my possessions in the sand, remembered where my body was. My chin stayed propped up, my eyes directed at the sound. A black metal object came into view. It hovered 100 feet in the air, about 50 yards past the wall. A real live helicopter was outside Salvation Canyon. All the other copters I'd seen or thought I'd seen in Baby Canyon long ago had no relation to me. They were just red and blue lights in a distant sky. But this one, metal, I remember saying to myself. A new element had come into being, not only in my life, but in the universe. The smooth black runners of the copter broke into the air and rocks as if from an alternate dimension. The cliffs, the ground, and the atmosphere of Salvation Canyon were all of the source I was settling into, that I was about to become a part of. This piece of formed hardness was not. The intense physicality of the thing amazed me, a solid object floating in air and so near. The thing disappeared momentarily and then popped over the lip of the supernatural northern wall. That was where the Jesus entity was. I squirmed around on my stomach, trying to raise my arms, and noticed my friend, the horsefly, was heard a sentence boom. Are you that Rosenthal that's out here? When I remembered that question afterwards, it seemed intensely funny, as if I would answer, no, I'm not, or no, he's in the next canyon. But it wasn't funny at all. I screamed out to the best of my ability, "Yes, I am." "Can you stand up?" asked the voice. "Yes, I can," I answered. I started to pull myself to my feet. I fell over, landing on my side. Seeing my condition, the pilot, whose face and headset were now clear, told me over the speakers, "We're coming around to get you." Thoughts appeared in my mind. Wow, I am tough. And what a survivor I am. But my guts, a different current overwhelmed me. Lying prostrate on the sands, I filled with appreciation for the ramshackle cliffs that had hidden me from the brutal sun. I remembered how I first got to the magical ring of walls and felt thankful for the clamshell rock right outside, which had hidden me in its black shadows on Sunday. My eyes turned to the graceful acacia. I had collapsed in her shade. Waves of gratitude swept over me in remembrance of all the forces I owed my life to. The moon in the morning sky watched my rescue. She'd been a compass on my shoulder. Every night she had lit the sky like a light in a baby's bedroom. The giant Orion who woke my mornings like a red-eyed nurse.
Ed, I have to break in. We have to stop. I'm really
No problem.
sorry.
No, it's
But,
no problem. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
It's been wonderful having you. You have such an
Oh.
amazing story, and remind.
And then if you just go to my website, you can buy it from the publisher, you know, then it's better for her than if it's bought from Amazon, but
All right.
wherever you want.
Thank you very much for coming.
Mhm.
Why don't
Thanks
you-
so much.
Wonderful.
I love
Thanks
your
so
shirt.
much.
Thanks a bunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I
Thanks
really
for coming.
appreciate it. You're
Glad you're
very
here.
welcome.
All right. Yes, we're glad you're here to tell
Well,
the
thank you.
story.
Thanks very much.
All right.
Ed,
Bye-bye all.
Have a wonderful day.
Yes.
Okay, thank
This
you.
was a great
And
idea. I
on and
really
on.
enjoyed it.
Merry